These moments can leave families.
What matters to you matters to us. WWL, the news, talk, sports powerhouse of the Gulf South. Back to Tommy Tucker.
747, 13 till 8. Jill Dennis joins us now, founder of ASAP Monitoring, Vice President, Association of Supervised Ankle Monitoring Providers. Morning, Jill. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I know you're busy, but tell us, if you will, about the state of ankle monitoring as it exists now, what the legislature is looking at, and what you would like to see done.
Well, when we started, the Times-Picayune actually called GPS in Louisiana Wild Wild West GPS. We had a situation where Miss Peggy Beasley was murdered in St. Francisville. And after assisting the DA in indicting the provider, the First Circuit Court overturned that indictment, saying there was no laws that said a GPS provider actually had to monitor someone. And for the past 20 years, we've monitored people in the city of New Orleans and the surrounding parishes. And we knew that there was a real need for some type of legislation and restraints when it came to GPS and making the providers accountable and responsible for the people that they were supervising. So our first year, we were able to actually put some restrictions in place that put providers responsible and accountable all the way to the point of they could go to jail and get kicked out of the state for 5 years if they failed to monitor adequately. And that was all good. Last year, the Attorney General worked really hard on making the judges accountable as well after Nicholas Marana shot 3 people on Iberville and Royal in broad daylight after having 49 violations after only being on ankle monitor for 60 days. So that fixed that. This year, what we're looking at is we have these rules in place. However, there's no centralized list of providers. No one knows who the providers are. Just as recently as yesterday, I received text messages from law enforcement saying, we're looking for this guy. He's on ankle monitor, but we can't figure out who the provider is. And when you look at those situations, we have some very good cases in Orleans Parish where, and Tyree Quinn is one of them, Nicholas Marana is another one, where through use of a centralized database, the offender management system, both of those defendants or suspects were in custody within 30 minutes and an hour and a half because of the use of a centralized system that all law enforcement in Orleans Parish and the surrounding areas has access to. They log in, they see who the provider is, who ordered the ankle monitor, if the person has been violating. All of this information is available. And we, in the state of Louisiana, we're using GPS more and more. As the jails get smaller or the people being held in the jail get smaller, GPS is what they're going to be able to protect public safety and protect victims. However, there's still some huge gaps, and we're here in the Capitol. Today we're going to go to committee on HB 955, which actually works with the law enforcement committee to have a centralized, at least list of providers, and to set up the state and the jurisdictions to be able to use an oversight system, the offender management system, in order for law enforcement, the courts, and the providers to have one centralized place for the data on people that are being supervised pre-trial. There's been a lot of talk in Orleans, and every single time we have this talk, they just retread an old wheel, and to the point where they blame a manufacturer. And in juvenile court in particular, they were using a company called BI. BI has great equipment. It's the way they used the reporting process that was the mistake. It wasn't the actual device. It was the way the criminal court system and juvenile court set up their reporting aspects. However, as early as January, we have a case where someone was shot 7 times by a juvenile who had a dead ankle monitor, and it took days for us to help law enforcement untangle the web to find out that this juvenile actually allowed his device to die 3 days before the shooting, and no one reported it. Just as soon as yesterday, we had a guy cut off his ankle monitor and run from Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. We still cannot see in the docket where the provider actually reported that strap tamper when it happened.
Hang on one second, Jill. Let me take a break. We'll pick it up here when we come back, all right, because we got to get traffic in. I'm going to tell you what you and Matt have done with ASAP. You've shown light on this ankle monitoring thing that I don't think the light would otherwise have been or would have been revealed. And you guys deserve some kind of reward for this. I'm not kidding you, or a award at least, because I don't think we'd be as far as we are without you two and the whole organization. 7:52, 8 till 8, traffic now.
There's a reason I try.
7:57, Tommy Tucker. Quickly back to Jill Dennis. Jill, when it comes to ankle monitoring and what you're testifying before the legislature today, first of all, you already covered the fact that it all comes down to communications, right? That there's this lack of communication when it comes to ankle monitoring in general in the state and responsibility. Am I accurate in that or not?
There is. And the bills that are going in front of the committee today, the first one is House Bill 955. And what this bill is going to do is provide a statewide provider registration and compliance. So it will create an actual registration. It will require the certification that's already in law. It will require background checks on providers, and it will, and a 5-year record retention. And then we're also working with the Louisiana Law Enforcement Commission on Law Enforcement to give them the ability to not only make sure that compliance is happening, but to maintain an actual statewide registration. One of the other bills this session is House Bill 159, and it is actually a pilot program for Cato Parish. And there is some issues with that, as we're able to get an amendment on it saying that the provider has to follow the law. However, if you look later in that bill, it actually gives immunity to not only the sheriff, the DA, the judge, but also whatever provider they pick. So we do need to fix that bill. It's also taking some per diem money to pay for ankle monitors on nonviolent offenders, which is something I really don't understand. I would have to see a report on how many nonviolent offenders they actually have in the Cato Parish Jail. That would be sufficient to have a pilot program run. And then 123 is actually a bill that would have shifted, actually made a registration in the state, a certified system. However, there was a lot of problems. This bill.
Jill, I hope you come back.
The Saints, LSU, and Pelicans. 870 AM WWL New Orleans.